All right, this meeting will now come to order, and I will read the EPSB mission statement. The Education Professional Standards Board, in full collaboration and cooperation with its education partners, promotes high levels of student achievement by establishing and enforcing rigorous professional standards for preparation, certification, and responsible and ethical behavior of all professional educators in Kentucky. Serving as board secretary is Sharon Chesser. Ms. Chesser, please call the roll.
Amanda Ellis, Susan Reber, Diane Berry,
Present.
James Cousins, Elijah Edwards, CJ Fryer,
Present.
Kathy Gunn, Priscilla Keller,
Present.
Amy Lingo, Jacqueline Mayfield,
Present.
Corinne Murphy,
Present.
Meredith Pittman, Lisa Rosinski,
Present.
Amber Snell,
Present.
Vice Chair Weedman,
Present.
Chair Mitchell.
Present. All right, I believe we have quorum there. Ms. Chesser, has
Yes.
anyone signed up for open speak?
Yes, Cameron Nolan.
All right, Cameron Nolan, come forward here. Welcome. If you'll have a seat there at the table, wherever you choose. And if you'll state your name and who you represent, and then just a reminder, you have 5 minutes.
All right, yes. Y'all hear me? So I'm Cameron Nolan. I guess I'm representing myself. I work in JCPS, and I just wanted to know, how do y'all determine what type of punishment to give teachers, even after they've been reprimanded back after a situation?
Okay, well, during
What goes into play? Like, what goes into place when y'all are, determining a punishment?
So during open speak, we unfortunately can't ask questions or answer questions during the open speak.
So what am I
process.
supposed to do up here?
You're welcome to speak on your behalf to the board, and then we can take that into consideration during the rest of the meeting or in closed session.
That's really what I've been trying to do. I really just wanted to talk to somebody in regards to a situation that I've been involved in. I've been nothing but cooperative with EPSB, and y'all are not really on my side with me. I've followed all the directions that I've had to do as far as y'all gave me classes to take. I ended up taking classes, and y'all sent me back a letter saying that y'all did not, I wrote not an appeal, but like a reconsideration of classes. I'm in my last class at the University of Cumberland. I'm getting my master's, which means that's a very rigorous course. And on top of that, y'all gave me 3 classes that were 15 hours apiece for whatever reason. So with 45 hours of classes that are kind of irrelevant to the situation that I was involved in versus the classes that I already have. And I've already written this in a note, like in a letter to y'all. And on the website, I guess where y'all have the list of classes to take, there's like directions that says, hey, if you want to file for a notion of reconsideration, get a whole bunch of documentations and emails and stuff. I had my University of Cumberland supervisor send y'all an email. I had like 5 of my colleagues send y'all an email. And it wasn't an appeal. It was basically saying, hey, can I take these classes instead of, you know what I'm saying? Like, y'all wanted me to take 3 15-hour classes. I asked if I could take, several classes that weren't so rigorous because of me being an ECE teacher, full-time parent, you know what I'm saying? And like I said, I'm trying to finish my classes. Y'all sent me back a deny letter with no explanation behind it. So I'm really just trying to figure out, I guess, the motive behind all that. I'm trying to advance in my career. I haven't been able to get some of my assignments done because I'm no longer a teacher of record because of this right here. I finally did the 3 classes. Y'all sent back one of them saying that I had to redo all this stuff, which I haven't even had to do that in Cumberland's. Like, it's like y'all are grading it extra hard for whatever reason. So I'm really just waiting on the next 2 classes to get back to me so I can advance in my career. My last class ends at the end of December. I haven't been a teacher of record in some months, so I'm missing some assignments. You know what I'm saying? So y'all are really hindering me from advancing in my career. So I don't really know what else to say, but I wasn't even really trying to do an open speak. I would love to kind of talk in private, but yeah, y'all are EPSB, so y'all are the ones handling the case. So that's really what I was trying to get at and talk to y'all about. So outside of this, is there any way I can speak to somebody or email somebody back and forth? Because I really just wanted to come and say, like, would y'all please hurry up and just grade it so I can get my certificate back so I can graduate on time? I don't really know what else to say. If you can't tell, I'm kind of nervous. I wasn't expecting to come up here and do all this, but yeah, that's really it. I just feel like y'all haven't been reciprocating the effort I've been putting in to try to resolve this. I've done nothing but follow y'all's directions. Like literally nothing but follow y'all's directions. I didn't file an appeal letter. I said, hey, what I did, I admitted to it, but y'all wanted me to take a class on 2 ethics classes and a trauma class. I took 2 ethics classes and a trauma class, but the fact that they weren't the ones that y'all told me to do, you denied it. So I'm doing all this back and forth, trying to get myself together, and y'all aren't helping me at all.
All right.
So like I said, I don't really know what else to say, but
Thank you. And we will take this into consideration during
please
closed
do,
session.
please do, because like I said, my last class ends at the end of December, and I still have several assignments that I have to do, but I have to be a teacher of record. And like I said, I've already done the classes, but for some reason it's taking forever for them to come back to me graded.
All right.
So appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Ms. Chester, has anyone else signed up for open speak?
No, that's it.
All right. At this time, we will now move to consent items. Items A through V are listed on the agenda as consent items, and I will give the members a moment to review that list. Does anyone wish to remove any of the items from the consent agenda for further discussion? Having received no request to remove items from the consent agenda, can I have a motion to approve consent items A through V?
I make, oh, you got it, girl.
Jackie Mayfield, I move to consent these items, approve these items.
Thank you, Ms.
Consent
Mayfield.
items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve consent items A through V. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And the motion passes. Today we have 2 information items. These items are presented to the board for review and discussion only, starting with information item A, presented by Cassie Trueblood.
Just thought I'd get a different view of the board here. So actually, our next 3 items are all related. They all deal with some issues around federal IDEA regulation. So I have David Wickersham from the Office of Special Education and Early Learning with me to answer questions specific to IDEA and some of the work going on in OSEAL. But jumping in with information item A, this is going to start on page 95 of your docket, or sorry, of your agenda book. We're not in closed session yet. But this is dealing with revisions to the regulation for emergency certificates. And those, the main proposed amendment is to remove the ability to issue emergency certificates for special education. So that's going to be all of your exceptional education as well as interdisciplinary early childhood education. And the reason for that is because that is not compliant with federal IDEA requirements. This is something that a lot of states are going through. We've seen this all around. Mr. Wickersham can speak a little bit more to that if you have questions. Can you not hear me?
Perfect, thank you.
If you have questions specific to the IDEA portions, but it does, the amendment would no longer allow for emergency certificates for special education. Additionally, there are some amendments cleaning up some language, as you could see. I did try to bold that for you, but the regulation previously has a lot of information in it, and it was kind of pushed together, so we tried to separate that out a little bit to break it down among emergency teaching certificates, emergency substitute certificates, and then the emergency OCTE certificates as well. Not really changing those requirements as much as just making them into their own sections. However, we have proposed some updates to the GPA requirement and to the reissuance requirements based on some of the actions that the board has taken previously. Specifically, if you are looking at the GPA portion of that, we did maintain that 2.5 GPA for issuance, but instead of it a 3.0 on the last 60 hours, putting that at a 3.0 on the last 30, which is in line with the other GPA requirements. And then also allowing for 2 issuances of an emergency certificate unless they are being issued that certificate for less than half of the teaching duties or after February 15th, then they would have an additional issuance. So a lot of changes in that, but the headline grabber is really going to be the prohibition against issuing emergency certificates for special education. The regulation is included for your review, and that starts on page 97 of your agenda book. Are there any questions for me or for Mr. Wickersham?
How many did we issue? Do you know how many we issued of that we can no longer do? I don't know what I'm trying, like how many have we issued historically annually?
Yes, so thank you. So we did issue 290 of those certificates in the last school year. However, our next information item is going to talk about ways that those people could be certified as opposed to pursuing that emergency, because a little over half of those were individuals that already held some type of certification and are just adding the emergency for special education.
Thank you.
Would people who already have this certification be fostered in? I'm assuming people who've already obtained an emergency certificate.
It would be valid through this school year, but after this school year, they are not eligible for an emergency certificate.
Okay.
Because we're not taking the certificates away mid-year. This is coming before you for an information item and would come back in February as an action item and then would go through the legislative process, but would hopefully be in effect for the next school year through that process.
Would we put it in? Would there be an emergency clause on that KAR, or would it? What's the time frame once it goes through that process?
This one is not going to qualify for the emergency regulatory process. It would have to go through the full process. But when we looked at the dates, we are looking at an effective date prior to the 24-25 school year.
And do we have some plans in place to notify those people who currently are certified who would maybe not be able to obtain that certification if the circumstances are the exact same?
I think that will be getting into information item B a little bit.
Sure.
And developing those and that communication.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, moving on to information item B.
Okay. So information item B, which begins on page 110, is talking about really publicizing those options for special education certification that already exist. Those that we have done the review to make sure that they are compliant with the IDEA requirements. And so I think Captain Rosinski, your point about notifying those candidates, we were originally thinking about notifying the districts because those are the ones that are requesting emergency certificates. But that is a great point as well of making sure that we are publicizing the existing routes to that certification for both our districts and our candidates. So we have listed those routes in the staff note, but we'll also work to have a guidance document that I think could be, we can have one for staff and one for the districts. In there, we also have some information that OCL has provided to us regarding the traineeship program, which will provide funding to help offset the cost of certification. And so that is the plan with the guidance document is to show not only the options, but some potential funding sources as well.
Are there any questions?
My question would just be the budget impact on the staff note.
Oh, yes, staff will be required to develop materials and publicize materials.
Thanks.
Justin, can I just make a comment?
Of course.
So just speaking from an EPP perspective, I think it's really valuable that we're helping folks really understand what is already available. A lot of times, and I've said this before, so I'm a little bit of a broken record, but a lot of times the emergency legislation, regulation, statute, whatever you want to call it, that comes through is a function of not necessarily fully seeing what's available as far as licensure is concerned. And I think our dedication to making sure that HR directors and principals equally know what their options are so that when they're looking at a staffing plan, they can have a good constructive conversation around how to meet the special education needs is really important. So I value everybody's extra effort in making sure that we have some clear communication around what are the available resources to our principals and HR professionals as they look at next year. So that's it. That's all. Soapbox, same.
Thanks. Any other questions? All right. And moving on now to action items. Just make sure we're at the right spot. All right. These items are presented to the board for action and will require a motion to vote. Action item A is also presented by Ms. Trueblood.
Okay, and this is an item that you saw at the last meeting as well as an information item, and it's now before you for action. This really kicked off our discussion of compliance with the IDEA requirements and renaming that process that was problematic in name, but it does apply only to those special education certifications and being allowed to have additional students placed. That regulation is also included in your materials, and if you approve today, we will file it before Friday, which is the deadline to get started with the process to be published in January.
Thank you. Are there any questions before we? All right. Well, I need a motion at this time then.
Sarah Weedman, I make a motion to approve action item A.
Thank
Second.
you, Ms. Weidman, and second by Captain Rosinski. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 4020 certification requirements for teachers of exceptional children with that amendment. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Next up, we're actually going to jump schedule just a little bit of the agenda just to make sure, because I know that she is extraordinarily busy, and so we're appreciative that she made time to give us the report to the interim commissioner. So Robin Kinney joins us as Executive Secretary of the EPSB, and so thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much. First, it's been a busy Monday. Has it been busy for you all too?
Yeah.
As we get started, I thought I would just provide a little bit of what's been going on here at the department in my world as it relates to things that you might be interested in here at EPSB. First, my thanks to you for sort of juggling your calendars. I'm sure someone has already talked about the interim joint committee already, maybe?
Not
No, we
quite
didn't.
yet. No.
Okay, well, we haven't got, I won't steal the thunder of that, but you know, the reason that you had to kind of juggle your time is because the interim joint committee on education decided to have a December interim joint meeting. And first, let me just share with you, that's pretty unusual. Interim joint committees usually last until November. And then they kind of take a little bit of a breath there and as we prepare for the next legislative session. So I'd like to encourage us to think of a December interim joint committee meeting of education as a positive. And the reason I'm thinking of it that way, and hope that you will too, is as we have been really trying to talk with members of the General Assembly, one of my main messages to them has been, we are here for information. We are here to help you understand how things work so that you can make really informed decisions on very important legislation that affects education. So I'm encouraged that they added another meeting to their calendar, and they wanted to talk about things related to your work here at EPSB. And I'm not going to steal all the thunder because, quite frankly, I haven't been briefed on what happened yet. But I sure hope it was a good meeting, and Cassie's nodding her head up and down, so that's good. But the level of interest is what is encouraging to me, that they really want to learn and understand about the work that EPSB is doing, as well as here at the Department of Education. So I thank you again for juggling your schedule so that we could, important staff from KDE and EPSB could attend. As I also have been talking with legislators, and I've also had the opportunity to talk with superintendents, of course, and local school board members. And one of the things that I've really been talking about, we talk about the Kentucky United We Learn Council and all the work that's going on there, how we really want each and every child to have very vibrant learning experiences, for us to really think about our students today and what they need. And it looks very different from when I was in school, perhaps. But as we talk about that and all the great things that we have on the horizon and sort of our change in instruction, what we want that to look like, there are two things that continue to give me pause. They are significant challenges for us. And as I've talked with superintendents and local school board members and lots of other advisory groups, the number one issue probably is still teacher recruitment and retention. And so trying to elevate that, talking to people about what that looks like. Our Kentucky Board of Education has asked for some additional budget requests to help support maybe some opportunities that don't yet exist to really help us with teacher recruitment and retention. And the other thing that really is concerning right now is student absenteeism. Student absenteeism, chronically absent students, almost at 30% for us last year, which means that those students missed 17 days or more of the instructional year as a chronically absent student. And we know that collectively, it'll take all of us to try to really get students back in the classroom. Vibrant learning experiences and great teachers will be a big part of that. But the other things that our students are struggling with continue to be sort of those after effects of the pandemic, social emotional issues, things that really it's going to take sort of the larger good to kind of help us with. So that's another thing that I've been traveling and talking about. The other thing I've had the pleasure of, I'm either going to tell Corinne I'm following her or she's following me, because our paths have crossed many times since our last board meeting. I had the pleasure of attending the Kentucky Teacher Hall of Fame induction at Western Kentucky University, which honor those teachers really for their career of service. And I will tell you, the work that you do in certification, licensing, making sure that we have great quality teachers in our classrooms was really evident that day in a celebration for 4 teachers, 2 that were there with us and 2 that have passed on. But ceremonies like that really reinvigorate yourself. You know, it makes you smile. It makes you appreciate all the support that it takes to have great teachers in our classrooms. Students, family members, colleagues, all in the audience just grinning from ear to ear with the accolades given of these teachers. So that was a really fun experience I got to participate in with Lieutenant Governor Coleman. She was there with us as well. So that's some of my travels. I've also been in local schools and districts watching vibrant learning experiences and the most fun talking to kids. And that's been very, very rewarding. In my former position in the Office of Finance and Operations, my role was more in a support capacity and behind my computer looking at a spreadsheet. And to go out and see great learning in practice with wonderful teachers that care about their students, that want them to be the very best they can be, and are looking at innovation as part of their educational experience. It makes me think we're doing the right thing. So I bring to you words of encouragement in the work that you do each and every day. It's important work, and it's important to our teachers, but it's also important to the students in the classroom. So I'm happy to take any questions. I know you have a very full agenda, as you always do, but it's a pleasure to be here again with you today.
Where are we in the search for the next commissioner?
You know, I should have led with that, shouldn't I? I feel like we are underway finally. So I can't remember, but we did have to go through look for our executive search firm twice. The first time we didn't have applicants that we felt were appropriate to award at that time, and so we reposted it again. And I'm happy to report that we do have a search firm under contract. McPherson and Jacobson is the name of that search firm. They actually appeared at the Kentucky Board of Education meeting last week, virtually with us. And we do have a special called Kentucky Board of Education meeting this week on the 14th to give them further marching orders, I guess I would say. I think the board is interested in either creating maybe an interview committee to start off with. They will either name those members at Thursday's meeting, or they will authorize the chair to do so if that motion is approved. And I will say the search firm has a very aggressive, but I think achievable timeline. They would like us to have our new commissioner start by July 1st. And that would be including the confirmation process that they feel pretty confident that we will find the next permanent commissioner and be able to have them confirmed in the upcoming session.
Nice.
So we're very optimistic. This is a search firm that has done lots of searches in the educational space, and they'll be working with the board at the special meeting on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I've got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The interview team that is selected, how do they select the people to be on the interview team? And will it be a diverse group of people?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. You know, Dr. Sharon Porter Robinson, who is our chair, is very interested in having participants of the interview team to be diverse and representative of the whole Board of Education. And she will be seeking volunteers first, but we'll have that in mind. So, and I think it's also important that the initial search interview committee will only help to get us to finalists. Once finalists are named, then the full board will be engaged. Candidates will interview with the full board membership and toward the selection of the one permanent commissioner. But Dr. Robinson is very interested in having that search committee, or that interview committee, I'm sorry, I keep calling them the search committee, but the interview committee to have that diversity in backgrounds of the full board.
I just have a question about your comment regarding chronic absenteeism. That is something that I hear across the board, and we've been experiencing, I know in our district, but just across the state. And it is an issue, and it's curious because in some conversations we got to get kids in school. How do we get them in the buildings? But then in other conversations, it's, well, brick and mortar schools are going to be obsolete in a few years. So it's like two interesting perspectives, and I just didn't know if the state is looking into, you know, those options. Are we feeling like we need to get kids in school, or are we needing to look at transforming the system and having multiple pathways and options for kids to attend school?
That's a great question. When I talk about having kids in school, that means wherever we would have them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always that we have kids in the brick and mortar building in the local school district. Lots of our school districts already have virtual options for students. I think we tend to, and I'm not an educator, but as I listen to my educator colleagues, they still value very much the personal interaction that being in a bricks and mortar building holds for our students. But we also know that there is a certain population of our students that might need the more virtual option for them. So I think we have to navigate both of those worlds. But the issue of chronic absenteeism, it's engaging those students wherever they are. So I think you're absolutely right. School may look very different in another 5 years or 10 years. And so we have to be flexible enough to be able to change and meet the needs of all those students under all those options.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much. I know you have a busy schedule, so I do really appreciate you.
I'm glad to
coming
be
and
here. I'm going to
reporting.
sit and listen for a while.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, jumping back into our action items, we now have action item B presented by Byron Darnell.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Sounds like a class. Hey, how you doing? No, it's great to have you all here. Thank you so much for rearranging your schedule. Again, I know that's not ever easy. We're off of our normal way of sort of presenting information, so that's why we hadn't really had an opportunity to talk through some of the other things today, but just very quickly, for the sake of time, the Interim Joint Committee, again, EPSB/OELE was well represented, and we have just knowledgeable individuals that were presenting information, and I think it was a fruitful time spent. So just want to give appropriate accolades for all the due diligence that's put into everything that made that a success, and then as well as, of course, getting everything ready and adjusted for this meeting at the same time. So all the people that are making the wheel spin mean so much. And we're on the cusp of a break in time, and this is important for a lot of reasons. And so for you all, I just want to wish you all time in enjoyment, time to yourselves, time to your families, time not spent over all of the things that you do every day regarding our education system. So happy holidays to you all, and mostly some time to relax. With the action item, this is exciting for me. On November 2nd, again, the time commitment that you all have provided, I think is just very honorable in trying to arrive at a new set of goals and priorities. The discussions with the other counterparts in other agencies, and then of course you're all diving into what you would like to see as a new sort of driving document or set of documents in the work of the EPSB. So based on the discussions from that November meeting, you now have a drafted set of EPSB goals and legislative priorities. The first document contains 4 goals covering educator preparation, certification, ethics, and communication. And then if approved, the goals will drive the agenda items for future EPSB meetings, as well as the work of the staff between meetings. Then the second document contains the legislative priorities for the upcoming session, which include funding for internships, financial incentives to support entry to and growth in the profession, and legislation that elevates the profession. So both documents have been included for your review, and we would like to present this as an item for consideration of approval by the board overall.
Any questions or comments? I will say I'm really excited about these goals and these legislative priorities, and I do think that will set us up for success in this upcoming year as well as our future years. So I'm really excited about having this sort of clear vision for our board moving forward. All right.
Cassie, I think you and your team did a great job of capturing that conversation within the context of all of the new goals and the new ways in which we'll reach those goals. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for making time in your schedule in November to hear from stakeholders and to be here. We know it's always hard to get away from the classroom, but it is great to have direction, and actually got a chance to give a few shout outs to a few of these goals this morning at the interim joint. So it was nice to have something to point back to.
So we should pass these goals if we've already been pointing to them.
motion
Uh,
approve them.
Thank you, Ms. Snell, with the motion to accept, and Dr. Murphy for the second. The motion before the board is to approve the EPSB goals and legislative priorities. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Darnell. Next, we have action item C, presented by Melissa Diebel.
Good afternoon. Most of the time we have to say good morning, huh? Well, we appreciate the decision the EPSB will make regarding the work and recognize that it will have a great impact on education preparation programs across the state. I have with me today a member of the early literacy cohort who had joined me in October, Dr. Wynn Wheeler, who's the assistant professor of literacy education at Bellarmine University. Sharon Salzman is here as she oversees our assessment things. To review some background, the EPSB, through legislative action, has been tasked with maintaining a list of approved teacher preparation tests that are determined by the board to be an effective evaluation of reading instruction, knowledge, and skills by January 1st, 2024 in KRS 164.306. We only have one update since the October meeting. We did have two representatives sit on the standard setting committee for ETS on the early childhood education literacy assessment. They've shared that they believe the content of the test appears to be in line to the early literacy legislation for the appropriate age span of birth to 6 years old. The test will be piloted in September of 2025 with study materials available in July 2025. Our members agreed that our candidates should participate in the pilot. They also wanted me to note that the test addressed early numeracy as well, and therefore will address all of the areas of focus that have been kind of in discussions recently. I will now ask Dr. Wheeler to share the summary of the ELC recommendations.
Good afternoon. The overall recommendation of the ELC for elementary education is to add Praxis Test 5205, Teaching Reading Elementary, to the already established state requirements, Core Academic Skills for Educators 5752, Elementary Education Multiple Subjects 5001, Principles of Learning and Teaching, Grades K through 6 5622. The overall recommendation is that students be given a year with no cut score to do no harm to those with different curricula within their literacy coursework, and to move to the multi-state standard setting studies cut score for the 2025-2026 school year, adopting the -1 SEM as has been done by the boards with all previous Praxis exams. The ELC also recommends viewing this as a pilot for the next 2 years with a review of assessment data and program employment impact after each year of data. Additionally, the ELC could not find a suitable assessment measure for early childhood that addresses the literacy legislation and is appropriate for the grade span of Kentucky certification, birth through 6 years old. However, one will be piloted in September of 2025. Therefore, the ELC would recommend that the board extend the deadline for consideration of that specific assessment to begin in the fall of 2025. Additionally, the ELC would like to recommend that the EPSB accept the current testing requirements for the remainder of the 2023-2024 school year, setting August 2024 as the start date for the required testing of the new literacy assessment. And we would like to invite any questions that you all might have.
Any questions?
I make a motion to approve action item C.
All right, we have a motion by Captain Rosinski. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. The motion before the board is to approve the action item C, the early literacy assessments that are included in the agenda book there. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Do we have to make a decision today? Or like, I guess I'm asking, do you really feel like this was the best shot? Do we have to do this today? If we were to request an extension, if we're able to, do you feel like there would be more sufficient options out there to explore? Or do you feel like you've done all that you can do? And I'm asking that like I'm not even coming at it from like a pessimistic view. Like, do you feel like you need more time? Are there more things to explore? Was this something like down to the wire? Just because I trust you all. I just have such a hard time in my soul adding another praxis exam. So if there's any other way.
So, to speak to that before the committee chimes in here, yes, unfortunately, the board does have to make a decision by statute. By statute, you are required. And this was one of those things where with the legislature, it was, we hear some conversations around testing, but this was one where they said, yes, there needs to be a test on this, and you need to have the EPSB has to have an approved list of tests by January 1st. And as this is your last meeting prior to that deadline, yes, you do need to approve a list of tests today. However, that does not start until the next school year. But that being said, you do also have the ability to vote your preference on that, whether that is to abstain or to dissent from the full board's adoption.
If someone were to dissent, it would probably just be because of, just the concern of adding a praxis. But thank you guys for your hard work. I know you guys have worked really hard. So thank you.
And I will say, Sarah, we've really looked at every possibility and want to see the data on this test next year. That's why we're saying it should be a pilot. We think we can look at this while continuing to look at other options. But of all the options we looked at, this is really the one we felt the strongest in.
Well, maybe that can be an action for testing companies, is to look into other ways aside from praxis. And maybe that's something we can charge them with, is some more creative options. So thank you guys.
Any other discussion?
Did we talk about the dollars for the pilot? Are there dollars available for the testing of the pilot so the students aren't bearing the cost? Or I can't remember whether that was part of the conversation or not.
Yes, that is through, is it Kate?
Educational.
CK, thank you. I'm going to let Sharon answer this one. So yeah, we have the funding available through that.
So at least it won't be an additional financial burden during this period of time.
Any other discussions or questions?
And in the interim, since I've wrote down September of 25 is when the testing is going to be like required across the board.
That'll be, for the early childhood.
So if anything else comes up in the interim, we can always add or revise, correct?
That's correct. And our group does feel that next year we'll bring forward, like we want to report to you what the findings have been, and that you can, we may have recommendations of adjustment. We may feel like it's working well, but we plan to monitor this into the next several years and offer you guys a report back to what we see as positives or hindrances or anything like that.
Any other discussion?
I just feel like I have to ask on the math side of things. I know we're talking about early childhood. I know we're talking about literacy here, but only because you mentioned numeracy. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and explain also like what early childhood would still normally be doing?
So I can't speak to it as clearly because
Sure.
I'm not early childhood, but I know that the people that we had represented said that the test that they're looking at for early childhood would focus on, early childhood concepts, again, not my area, so I can't really define them, but they do also incorporate the early literacy components, but they also noted that it incorporates early numeracy.
Okay.
I don't know what that means specifically. We do have a task force or a work group cohort, I don't know, I haven't come up with a name yet, but of math people that we're going to start looking at how to do kind of a similar, not at a test, but how we can do a similar deep dive into curriculum of math pre-service work. So,
I was really just advocating for math to get that level
Yeah,
because
and I
we need
know,
that strong foundation at that. Yeah, yeah.
I know Dr. Murphy and Dr. Dinkins both presented about the work being done at the EPPs,
Right.
and they're doing stuff.
Right.
So
Yeah, of course.
we just want to highlight it.
100%.
You know?
They're doing great work.
Are doing stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
Lots of great, lots of really great stuff.
Just a few
Yes.
things, right?
Yes. Cool. Thank you.
Any other discussions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And the motion passes. Thank you all. Next up, we have action item D presented by Sharon Salzman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So this one is for the expanded assessment option. So back in December of last year, can't believe it's been a year already. But the board did approve the -1 SEM, which is standard error of measure, to meet the requirements for all of the Kentucky Praxis assessments through December of this year. So through now. So now we have to make a decision on what we're going to do with the cut scores for all of our Praxis. That includes the case, content, the PLT, all of them, even the school leader's licensure assessment. So the standard error of measure is an established testing principle that estimates the variation around a true score for an individual when repeated measures are taken. The standard error represents how well the test score reflects true ability. It is used to create confidence intervals around a cut score. Since there will always be a chance for false positives and false negatives, adopting a score of -1 SEM is a way to decrease the chance of false negatives. And that means people who have the abilities needed but didn't demonstrate it by meeting the recommended passing score. The EPSB also approved the PPAT to meet the requirements of 16 KR 6010 through December of this year as well. So under this approval, a candidate could use successful completion of the PPAT to meet the content and pedagogical assessments required of 16 KR 6010. We do have Jason Dietrich here from ETS, which is the Educational Testing Service, who handles all of our assessments. And he's going to provide you with some more information regarding the -1 and the PPAT.
Thank you, Ms. Salzman. Chair Mitchell, Vice Chair Weedman, distinguished members of the board, thank you for having me here today. It's my pleasure to be back meeting with this board. As Sharon said, it's been about a year since you voted for the approval of the -1 SEM and the adoption for the pilot of PPAT. So those pilots did go live 1 year ago, and today I want to share some data points on the Praxis -1. I don't actually have a presentation today. We were trying to keep it a little abridged due to your time. And then we'll discuss a little bit about the onboarding of PPAT, and then Sharon, I believe, will make some recommendations to the board. So as a highlight of some of the increased passing numbers of Praxis candidates, this discussion will not contain the full data set, but the spreadsheet will be sent to KDE to disseminate to the board. Okay. I'll just touch on a few really high-level kind of feel-good updates, if you will. So let's start with elementary education. That's usually a high-needs area in most schools in most states. What I can report to the board today is you have seen a substantial increase in candidates being licensure ready by passing the elementary subtests since going to the -1 pilot. So in your reading and language arts, you have an additional 177 candidates that were licensure eligible under that subtest, an additional 230 candidates eligible under math, 341 candidates eligible under social studies, and 287 candidates under science. Now, to keep in mind, they have to pass all those content areas. But some of those historically, we would see individuals having to take those subtests multiple times because they seem to be a little more difficult. So you've actually garnered a lot of candidates by that -1. One item of true note here on the multiple subject science subtest, the 5005, under the previous Kentucky adopted cut score, you were at about a 69, almost 70% pass rate. By utilizing the -1 SEM, that has taken you to an almost 88% pass rate just in that one subject area. So there's been significant growth. We've seen also on social studies, you've gone from about a 65% pass rate under the prior cut score to almost an 86% pass rate. It's been a substantial increase in candidates. Middle school mathematics, just kind of an anecdote here. While you've only garnered approximately 32 additional candidates eligible for licensure for that assessment, it's gone up almost 18 percentage points in passage, which is pretty significant for a mathematics assessment. Your special education core, mild to moderate. While you've only garnered an additional 53 candidates licensure eligible, you have increased almost to a 97% pass rate. Kentucky was usually pretty strong in your special education content and knowledge assessment passage anyway, so I didn't think we'd see actually that number of growth, to be honest with you. I figured you'd stay pretty close just because you were very well prepared in Kentucky for special education. In just anecdotally, a couple of your principles and learning teachings, your PLT, your pedagogy, you've gone an additional 82 under your elementary pedagogy coursework, assessment. You're at almost a 98% pass rate. And on your 712, your secondary, you've gone almost same thing, about to a 98% pass rate on those pedagogy assessments. Kentucky, as I stated a year ago, did very well in this previously. You know, Kentucky is ranked really high across the nation, honestly. When I look at your cut scores and we compare them across the national like we did a year ago, Kentucky does an exceptional job preparing candidates. And the last subset that I will discuss today is your core academic skills for educators. So your reading, writing, and math. So on your core reading, you've had an additional 93 candidates pass, taking you to approximately an 83% pass rate. On your writing, you've had 121 additional candidates pass. You were previously at about a 45% pass rate on that assessment. It was really low, which historically across the country, that fits. It's pretty similar to most states, but you've gone up to almost a 60% by going to the -1. And on the core math, you've garnered 101 additional candidates, going from a 68% pass rate up to a 78% pass rate. So there has been some gain in core, but obviously your noticeable gains are in your elementary, your special education, and some of your secondary subjects. And again, this information in its entirety will be sent to the board. Okay. So do we have any questions on praxis, or would you like me to proceed with PPAT?
Do you have a total number, like encompassing number of how many people were able to be certified because of this?
Great question. No.
Awesome.
And let me explain why. There's a couple of variables here. When candidates are taking an assessment, they report under what we call the DI, which is the state client for a score recipient. Certain candidates also report under what we call the AI, which is your EPP or your preparing institution. You also have candidates that will report under both. So you have the duplicative count. Okay. What I will say is the numbers I gave you today were reported under the DI, which should be pretty much every candidate that took an assessment reporting to the state level. But you will still have some candidates on the AI or EPP side that will report but did not send their scores to the state. So we could probably request a deeper dive of that data, trying to match candidate for candidate. That would be time consuming, obviously, but I could request that if that was the will of the board. It would probably be later towards summer after the legislative session, because we do have an extensive amount of data requests for legislatures across the country. So just keep that in mind. But if that was so the wish of the board, we could work with KD and provide that.
I mean, I know I would like that. I don't know about anyone else, but I think that would be interesting to see across the board just how many people, because I'm looking at this, I'm like, so was it like 800 people or was it 400 with all of these? So just, I would be curious, but I don't want to speak for everyone else, but if anyone else would like to see it.
I would say, just because of my knowledge base with the data, I would say you're probably around the 300 to 350 realm.
Okay.
For additional candidates, just kind of off the cuff, maybe
That's
a little
perfect.
more.
Okay. Thank you.
But that does not also include any efforts on the part of KDE with retroactive licensing issued under these assessments.
Oh, awesome.
So they would have those numbers. Do you?
I don't have them with me, no.
Thank you.
But I will hear, we've heard from EPPs and we hear from KDE. It's been a huge increase. It's been very positive by doing this.
Any other questions on the praxis portion?
I have a question, but I'm not certain how to really ask it. I'm hearing the positive part, the ones, the number that of the people that did do well. What about those who didn't do so well, or the percentage? Because I heard you say that you don't have, I guess, all the numbers, because I guess some people don't submit things to the state. Is there a reasoning why they don't submit it to the state? Is it because they didn't do well? I'm just wondering what effect did it have on those who didn't do quite so well?
So good question. So historically, we see a myriad of reasons why an individual would not want their scores reported to their state. So when you're in border state situations, when you have individuals in Kentucky that are being prepared but intend on being licensed and teaching out of state, they will not historically send their scores to the state where they're being prepared. They will send it to the state where they will be seeking licensure. So we do see that quite a bit, especially when you have a lot of vacancies in border states, or if you have an individual that lives close to a border, can go right across the border and teach. And it's a lot closer than maybe, driving an hour or two with inside the state. We do see that. You have individuals that merely forget. They don't check to send their scores to the state. So those scores can be sent at a later date, but we do see a fair number of individuals that don't actually send their scores across. It's all anecdotal information. We don't send out any specific queries to candidates to find out why they don't, because it is actually not required that they do that.
I have a question. Do we reach out to those who are currently eligible due to the change so that they're made aware that they may now be eligible to apply for the passage versus, because obviously they previously received notification that they did not pass? And we know that this is out there, and of course those people that we share with, but have we sent letters out because we have the scores, or for those we have the scores on, to let them know you might want to reapply at this point because there's been an adjustment to how we view your score?
Great question. So it's kind of a two-part here. We'll both have to jump in. So ETS as an organization, we can run the data for our state client, which is KDE. We do not have the authority to reach out to those candidates respectively because the cut score is set as a state policy. So as an organization, we can't do that. However, we have worked very closely with KDE, and they have reached out to candidates in some manner. I think I'll let Sharon answer that part of it.
So we've posted it everywhere that we send out any type of newsletter, or like the commissioner's newsletter, that type of thing. So we've posted it and we've publicized it. It's on our website. It's on ETS's website. We've contacted the whole group of CACTI that meets after this, which is the EPP deans and leaders. So we've contacted them. So the word is getting out. Have we contacted each individual candidate? No, we haven't done that yet.
We did receive a lot of, following the board's action last December. Our Office of Communications was great about getting this out, getting it published, and we received a lot of communications back. Actually, Tony Tapman got a lot of emails that were then coming back to our office with individuals that were interested.
And I can tell you that the EPPs took that, many of the EPPs, I can't speak for all of them, but many of the EPPs took that information and did reach directly out to candidates. So the EPPs can do that. And so we had one-on-one conversations with people who were within that -1 SEM, and many of them did choose to pursue certification, which was great. We were really excited to see that.
Any other questions about the praxis portion? I'll say it's not a question, but I am excited to see these numbers the way they are. And just from your comment that Kentucky has historically prepared our students for the praxis, and just that goes kudos to our EPPs that are here. So thank you all in the EPP areas to make sure that you all are training up our pre-service teachers to prepare them for those tests.
Chair Mitchell, could I jump in with one question? So like, as we look at the two columns of praxis cutoff scores, the one being like the regular passing score, the other one's the -1 SEM, right?
Yes.
Can you remind me like what other states we know of that are doing a similar thing? I can't remember if we talked about this or not. This was my first meeting last year, and I remember being caught in the whirlwind of this. So it's crazy when you said it was a year ago. But like, because I'm just like pulling up like on the Praxis's website, like again, passionate about math, right? Wanting people who have strong content knowledge in the classroom, and like Kentucky's, like at least on the Praxis website, when you pull up all the states who still report qualifying scores, Kentucky looks like the oddball out. Do you know what I mean? And I guess I'm just saying, like, are other states like still using like the old passing rate, but then they have their own verbiage, or like, because ours reports what's in the SEM or in the -1 SEM column, right? And the other states still mostly pretty much all support the other one. So I just, you know what I mean? Like just that, I'm a fan of the math side of things, like that whole, confidence interval. Like I have no problem with the -1 SEM, but I also just want to make sure our messaging is clear, because you could just pull this up as like a, general citizen and be like, wow, Kentucky's really lowered the standard compared to, all the other states out there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I don't know exactly how you want to respond to that, but.
So a couple things.
Yeah.
Within our website or the information that we put out that is visible to any and all, we don't delineate a -1 or -2 SEM. We have found in the past that was disparate to states.
That makes sense.
So what we do is, under that standard error of measure, we apply that to the adopted cut score, come up with that revised cut score at the lower standard, right? And then that's what we do for your published cut score. It ranges anywhere on most assessments from 5 to 7 point reduction in the cut score from what you had previously. And I heard a lot, like 3 or 4 parts to the question.
I know. I don't even know what my question really was. It was more just general commentary of like,
I'll get there.
To battle that, the public.
Good word problem.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Finally.
This is a test for me today. I got you. So the other part I heard as well is other states.
Yes.
Okay. I think Kentucky, along with a couple of your neighboring states, were a little bit of a trailblazer here. Okay, in a really good way.
Yeah.
Okay, you saw the need, you sought out a solution, you acted. Okay, there are a fair number of states out there that have been reviewing a -1 or -2 for a few years now. Depending upon the political environment in some of those states, they have not acted because of that. Okay, but they're losing candidates. Okay, because we all know it's a different space in the world now, right? Since COVID, things have greatly changed in the education system across. So we are seeing that. Now you do have other states like Arkansas. Arkansas has been on a -1 for years. Okay, they have a -2 as well that they did under an alternate assessment plan. So if you failed under the -1, but passed under what would have been the -2, and most recently it would have been completion of a micro-credential, Okay, then they would pass you through on that alt assessment plan. Now, what I will say to that is very daunting on the team at KDE, right? That's all manual. And Arkansas has realized that. So it's not really public, but public, kind of, sort of, quasi. Arkansas is moving forward now and adopting all assessments at a -2. That's the decision they've made. Because I think they saw a large uptick in candidates coming through on the alt plan. So it probably made more sense for them to just adopt the -2, eliminate that need for the alt plan, and have those individuals be licensure eligible. And keeping in mind the -2 is still within a standard error of measure. You're just another step out. Okay. Did I hit them all?
No, that was great.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, absolutely.
Thank you.
I will anecdotally also say sometime January, February, a release will be coming out from ETS around additional supports and partnerships that we've recently contracted with. I'm not at liberty to say today, unfortunately. We're also doing a different website. I'll just call it a website. It's more of a portal at this point, where the candidates go, and they'll also be able to undertake additional assessment preparation through the registration of their assessments through some of these partnerships and things that we're doing. So it's going to change the landscaping a little bit, right? So I think that'll be a good thing too. And I'll forward that on, obviously, when we're ready for our press release, and that can be sent on to the board.
And I'll just comment back to say, between those services, I know even today, we talked about services that our local universities are offering to help with praxis, all those different things. I'm happy to hear the trailblazer perspective, right? That we're taking down some of the barriers. I know that Vice Chair Weidman has talked about people who the test is that barrier, but still also like not devaluing what it does show us about our content knowledge of our teachers. So I'm happy with that. So thank you for the explanation there.
Very glad I could be here.
All right, I think we're ready to move on to the PPAT portion.
We have to take action on that?
Well, I think we're going to combine all of the praxis and the PPAT. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
I think he was just pausing since we were going to
Okay.
change sort of.
I was just ready to-
Yeah, you're kind of at
ready
the
to
fork in the
move.
road, right?
Yes, we will vote, but we were just going to chunk it up there.
So that's up to you, Chair.
Yes, let's move on to the PPAT.
Thank you. Yeah, because it is a little bit of a sideline here of a conversation with PPAT. So a pilot of the nature of PPAT, which is that performance assessment, requires a lot of extensive training for faculty, understanding of the support materials, which there is an incredible amount on our website, a lot to go through. It also requires a lot of data collection and reflection. So that's reflection on candidates' part, EPP's part, ETS's part, because we have those raters or scorers and scoring leaders that are involved in scoring the PPAT. So it's a lot of continual reflection that happens. Most states that have onboarded or come on with PPAT, they have tended to adopt it as an assessment, whether it's a mandatory assessment or an optional assessment, which is what your pilot was here in Kentucky. Then they do the pilot under the adoption. Here in Kentucky, you decided to do the pilot first. Okay. So what other states have done, they have found that it takes 2 to 3 years under that pilot posture to truly get enough data to determine if that performance assessment is viable for that state. And the reason I say that is you only actually have 2 submissions with resubmission periods per year. So kind of think it like your school year, right? You have your 2 semesters. So you're only doing 2 submissions within that given calendar year or academic year. So it takes several years of submissions to garner enough data to ensure that the performance assessment is working, not only for individual EPPs, but for the state as a whole towards licensure, if that makes sense. During that 2 to 3 year period, I'll use Utah as an example. They were under a 3-year pilot at no cut score, which is currently where Kentucky is, no cut score. They just enacted their cut score this past September, starting into their 4th year of PPAT. So now it's truly an embedded assessment, and it is a requirement in Utah. They went the requirement route versus the option route. Okay, but it did take them 3 years to get there. Now they do function a little differently, and this is also a matter for discussion or a topic for discussion. I know when we were here a year ago, we talked about PPAT as an option under EPPs, but we are also starting to see other states adopt it as either an option or a requirement under alt prep. And I think option 6 here in Kentucky, it could apply as well. So there's other methodologies or other places where you could think about utilization, which would help under a pilot to garner additional data, okay? It's also incumbent upon us at ETS, now that the first submission is mostly over. I say mostly because the primary submission is over, the 2 resubmission periods have not happened yet. Okay, so once that's closed out, we'll be able to provide data on 1 full submission cycle for you, which would be fall of 23. But we have to work closely with the EPPs because we have to review all that data, and we have to ensure that we're able to provide appropriate supports to the EPPs. Because if we're not supporting the EPPs from our side, they're not able to support the candidates. So it's really a full circle. So with that being said, it does take several years. So the 1-year pilot that was implemented last December by this board, unfortunately did not give us adequate timing with onboarding and training to allow for multiple submissions. So we only had the fall submission, which is just, like I said, finalizing now. So it would probably take more time to get enough data for this board to make a long-term decision, if that makes sense. And I can take any questions around PPAT, or I'm sure Sharon would be happy to answer all of them too.
Absolutely. Any questions?
I think one of the things that, as an EPP representative, is how the PPAT is aligned to the content requirements that are in our syllabi. And I've overlooked that on the website, but I think that's really, I mean, because your other assessments, like in social studies, math, whatever, we can look pretty clearly to see what those content requirements are and be intentional as we design our curriculum. So I guess my concern about the PPAT is, yes, it's a performance assessment, but they choose which content area, correct?
Correct.
So if my candidate wanted to do elementary math, that would be the only assessment, or that would be the assessment. They wouldn't be assessed in, would they also have to do the PPAT in all other content areas that they would be teaching as part of an elementary school teacher?
So elementary is a sticky one. Mm-hmm. And there are some discussions still being had, obviously, with the state looking at some of those guardrails, if you will, going through the pilot. What I will remind this board, and you were on the board last year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And
I'm looking at CJ.
And it's a lot to take. PPAT is kind of a huge undertaking, right? PPAT does not directly measure content. PPAT is more on the pedagogy side. Now, what we do is we take the content area that is identified during the registration period for PPAT, and we ensure that we have a rater and a scoring leader for that candidate that has that background in that content knowledge. So while they're doing it under a pedagogical lens, they are still somewhat reviewing the content, the performance of how they're delivering that content, but the content portion is not graded under PPAT. So that could be where, as an EPP especially, it may be a little hard to get in that mindset, and because you're kind of backing out of the content area, really is what you're doing.
Right, and I'm not sure this board would want to see us back out. I don't want to see us back out of content that a candidate needs, because I think content has to come maybe even before pedagogy. Because if you don't know it, I don't think you can teach it. So that's just something for the board to consider as we think about the PPAT in the future.
And if I may respond, Chair.
Of course.
Kind of what we've seen around the states that have onboarded with PPAT. A lot of the discussions started similar to the conversation we're having here today, actually. As they grew with PPAT over a pilot period, they kind of grew to love it, if you will, right? Because it's really a testament to the College of Ed and the work that they've done getting this candidate through PPAT, okay? We all know the content comes from the content colleges, okay? So content can be learned other ways. We've seen this time and time again. And middle schools are a great modeling of this, right? I mean, there's no textbooks anymore. There's, you know, depending upon the state and the districts that you're in, but everything's online, right? They're starting in middle school this way. So we've seen a lot of other ways for individuals to gain content knowledge or continue to explore and grow additional content knowledge. The pedagogy side of it, there's not a lot of that out there. So once you come out of your institution, right? So where are you getting those pedagogical supports? You don't really, unless you have a good mentorship program in a district or something of that nature, right? So the PPAT kind of really helps measure that. And I think that's why a lot of institutions do like the PPAT. But yes, to your point, just kind of to reframe from last year, it is not a content knowledge assessment.
Thank you.
And I will just say, I think one of the reasons we came to this and is one, it's a pilot, right? So that it is not the full-fledged and the only way that we can go about making sure teachers are certified into those classrooms or with that assessment. But I think that we had some interest from outside groups to make sure that we were really looking at our praxis scores and providing as many options to allow people in. So I think that's where we sort of went that route to say, well, let's look at the pilot and see, you know, where we get that data from to see, does this really lead us to something we want to do?
So I guess the question is, are we going to continue with is that what we're going to be, the recommendation?
Yeah, so the voting today would be to continue the -1 SEM as well as the PPAT as a pilot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For another year.
And
That's up to the board. I don't believe, Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a date in this specifically. We knew that the data was very positive around -1 SEM, and it kind of assumed that the board would want to proceed with that. And then with the PPAT, because of the onboarding process, knowing that there wasn't the data at this point, after hearing from Jason, it sounds like the recommendation, at least from the ETS side of things, to get that data would be to have another school year. But that would be the motion that the board makes today. If you are wishing to proceed with extending both pilots, then you could make the motion to approve the continuation of -1 SEM and the PPAT through December 31st of 2024. Or if you wanted to take action on the two separately, if you were only comfortable with approving one, that is also a possibility. It is completely the board's purview.
Are there any questions or comments about either one at this point, Praxis?
I just had a comment as well. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because we also are getting people passing the Praxis who can't teach. So you know the content, but you don't have the classroom management or skill set to deliver the content. So this, while it looks at, you know, general abilities, we would hope they would have the content knowledge as well, but it looks at the overall human being and their skill sets.
I would just say that we have assessments built into the EPP that assess whether individuals can teach during their clinical experience semester. So to say that they only take the content assessment and are out there is incorrect.
I mean, can I defer to Dr. Lingo, Dr. Murphy? Like, I mean, not to put you on the spot, but I mean,
I think
the -1 SEM, I'm feeling very comfortable about that. But I do think this is a valid point about the PPAT.
right, and I'm comfortable with continuing the pilot because I think, to his point, I just don't think we have enough data to make a decision about that. But I do think that at some point it is a shift from content knowledge to practice. And I just feel like now we do both of those. We assess during their clinical experience, during their methods, we assess them throughout their preparation program in addition to the content assessment. So I would just say that. I mean, Dr. Murphy, do you?
And I would concur with that. I think multiple pathways to demonstrate the skills and knowledge are necessary. I don't think that you can do one or the other. But I would encourage pilot data because I think we should make all of our decisions here based off of data. I do wonder whether the kind of data that's coming out of the pilot will really help us answer that particular question. I'm not sure that the PPAT data would necessarily speak to whether someone has the content knowledge, because that's, I think, the crux of the challenge here. So at the end of the pilot period, we would be asking ourselves the same question. I'm not sure that the data that we're getting during this pilot period is going to answer that question for us, because quite frankly, I think the -1 SEM is a huge step. I think it's a trailblazing step. I'm not sure that since we've taken that step, which is great, I'm not sure we need to move into a demonstration only situation. I think we can move into a blended approach that still would recognize content expertise at the same time of demonstrating pedagogical skills. So that would be where I would encourage us to go, but know that that data is probably not going to answer all the questions.
I agree with that, but I feel like we need the pilot to like make those decisions again.
Fair enough.
And to give even like ETS that data of like, we kind of want a both and more situation. How do we have a little bit of this? How do we have a little bit of that? But if we don't give the other some kind of shot, we'll never get to that happy medium.
And I'm happy to hear that you guys bring on a content expert in the panel. I would just love to see that more infused into the actual results part beyond just the person being there.
And what are those, I think to Dr. Lingo's point, what are those standards that that content
correct.
person is assessing within the context of the performance
Correct.
assessment?
Go ahead. Yes.
And I would say if you do extend the pilot, I think it would be great for ETS to come back to Kentucky and have a different type of sit down and session with the institutions to dig a little bit further into what the institutions need. You know, a decade ago, a product like PPAT would go hand in hand with a content assessment. They would take it all. But that's when you didn't have pipeline issues, right? So now you've got that quantity versus quality conversation going on around the country. But I think, you know, in the next 18 to 24 months, we're also going to redesign PPAT. It's going to a new platform. It's going to look different. There may be an opportunity, bringing especially Kentucky to the table, that maybe we can embed some content modules in it. I think we're open to those discussions. You know, anything we do needs to have positive impact to the field, not negative impact to the field.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to have those conversations. I know my leadership would be happy to have those conversations. So if you do extend the pilot, we'd be happy to physically come back to Kentucky and have those sit downs.
And I think it would need to include like both school districts and the educator prep programs. It's like, I get it. I know what you guys are saying, but I also know what we're seeing too. And so I'm not saying it specifically coming from either of your schools, where I know you guys do a lot of work on the college prep, but I also am not being dishonest about like, we have people that are showing up that aren't prepared to teach and aren't prepared to run a classroom. So those comments aren't directed at you all in your program specifically. And so I appreciate your input. And I think that's why it takes a diverse, experienced group of board, because we need to have those conversations, but there is something not connecting with a lot of people. And so figuring out how we look at both of those things through assessment, if it's combos, if it's one or the other. But there is some form of disconnect within from what we are seeing at schools. And I'm in schools every single day and work with teachers across the board. And we have over 90 elementary schools, and there is a disconnect somewhere along the line.
But I will add, I've also seen the teacher that has the pedagogy skills, and I'm like, oof, they do not understand some of that basic content knowledge that they're trying to teach. So that's where that content piece is still super important. But yes, I do agree with you, Mr. Weidman.
All right. Unless there's just a dying question or comment, I will need a motion, but I would encourage, just from what I'm hearing there, that motion be to continue this until December of 25 or 24, and then we'll reevaluate again at that point. So just throwing that out there.
So moved, exactly as you said it. I seconded.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy, for the motion, and Ms. Snell for the second. So the motion before the board is to continue the use of -1 standard error of measure SEM and the praxis performance assessment for teachers, PPAT, to meet the requirements of certification assessments through December 31st, 2024. Is there any discussion?
Can we have a report given to us containing specific and detailed information regarding what
Like
the
in our
results-
December meeting of next year?
More like I the report that was in the agenda book, something more comprehensive than that.
Okay, yes. And are you saying for the data that we just received today or for next year's?
In totality.
Okay, okay, great. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Thank you so much. And we are now moving on to action item E. And I think Sharon's with us pretty much the rest of the meeting, so.
Just get used to me, sorry. So this one is the assessments for the occupation-based career and technical education certification. We brought a couple of them before you, I believe, last board meeting, and there were a couple that had some more changes, so we are bringing those, and that is for the veterinary assistant and the wood manufacturing technology. So we are just asking for approval on those two, since we approved the other ones at the last board meeting.
Are there any questions or comments?
I make the motion to approve the amendment to the assessment order.
Thank you, Mr. Fryer, and second by Ms. Berry. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 6020 assessment prerequisites for occupation-based career and technical education certificate. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay, and the motion passes. Next is action item F.
Action item F is the option 7 institute proposal, and this one is for iTeach. So iTeach came before us, I don't remember what board meeting it was. It's been a while. They have now resubmitted, and the iTeach is part of the larger iTeach US organization and has held accreditation by the National Council for Accreditation of Teacher Preparation, which is NCATE, and the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation, which is CATE, since 2013. They do offer a blended competency-based educator preparation program that provides online instructional coursework that has been reviewed and revised regularly since the program's inception, and it is currently on its 4th iteration to ensure that instruction is aligned to current standards, reflective of the most recent research, and addresses new trends and issues in education. Each candidate does complete a 270-hour institute. iTeach offers continuous enrollment and asynchronous learning, resulting in each candidate's program timeline being unique to the candidate. iTeach has developed a rigorous standard-based curriculum that is aligned with the Interstate Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium, which is INTASC, standards and reviewed by CAPE. iTeach Kentucky plan demonstrates alignment with the Kentucky academic standards, and the curriculum includes multiple assessments. The iTeach Kentucky proposes to provide pedagogical and content courses using an approach which blends practical distance instruction via the internet and focused field-based experiences under the support and supervision of program staff. From the time a candidate is admitted into iTeach, Kentucky candidates are encouraged to begin making classroom observations, using critical thinking to reflect on what they observed and what activity or lessons impacted them. Once the candidate has completed 135 hours of training, he or she receives an intent to hire form. During the 1 semester teacher of record placement, a candidate is assigned a field supervisor who is a Kentucky certified educator. The field supervisor will observe the candidate's teaching practices at least 3 times during the field experiences. Through the refinements, an extensive system of internal assessments has been developed to assess the candidate's knowledge, skills, and disposition. iTeach Institute's proposal is included in the board meeting materials and requires approval from the EPSB before it may be offered for certification.
Any questions or comments?
Sorry. So they've come before us quite a bit, and is the reason because they're like resubmitting? Is that why they do not have to come before us today, or chose not to be here today to ask questions to? Because they've already done that. Is that what it is? I'm curious what changes they've exactly made from the prior times when we told them no multiple times till now.
So, first of all, when they first submitted their application, we had one set of guidelines that were out there because CKEC and iTeach came through at the same time, I believe in fall of 21.
That sounds
okay. So when we were all in the virtual setting, and that's when they were able to easily attend our meetings virtually as well. At that time, there were some concerns raised about the guidelines because it was found that the program had gone through and met the guidelines that were put forward. Both programs were deferred for a task force to meet. Dr. Lingo, I believe you were on that task force as well, to meet to revise the guidelines. The guidelines were revised, and when CKEC and iTeach came back before the board after reviewing the revised guidelines, CKEC was found to have met the revisions, and part of that was around their partnerships with Kentucky districts, and iTeach was lacking that at the time. At that point, iTeach was denied. We then, I feel like I should diagram this, sorry.
I remember.
From there, we did have the guidelines as well as the regulation is promulgated. So now the program, the resubmission, which Sharon has outlined some of the requirements of that. They've also partnered with some Kentucky districts at this point, so they have addressed that concern that the board had, and they have gone through the review process and have been found to have met, and that review process is through the Option 7 Review Committee, which is made up of EPP member, a cooperative member, and a district member, and they have found that under the revised guidelines, the regulation, that iTeach has met those requirements and has also addressed the concern of partnering with a district. So that is why they are back before you today.
I think I'm just concerned about this particular comment too about successfully piloted in Texas more than 14 years ago, because I specifically remember Julian Vasquez-Heilig was on the board during this time as well, and he spoke, I don't want to misspeak, but I've got a pretty good memory. He had spoken with the Commissioner of Education in Texas. And so I think that statement, according to I don't know if he's still current, but in the conversations that were had with Julian Vasquez-Heilig, Texas did not feel like it was a successful partnership and that it was very detrimental to their workforce. So, if they were here, that is something that I would ask them. But the fact that this was written in here, I think causes me a little bit of pause and concern, just because I know that this was specifically brought up, that there was a negative impact in Texas, I believe.
I just have a question that it says that it was CAPE accredited in 2013. CAPE is a 7-year reaccreditation process. Are they currently accredited by CAPE? And then down further, it references that the system has been refined as the program has gone through the NCAPE accreditation process. That was over a decade ago, at least. So I guess I just have questions around if that information they've written in here is accurate.
So originally they were approved by NCATE and they have gone through another cycle now that it is CAPE and been approved as well.
But that was that in 2013, so they've gone through another one in 2020.
Yes,
so they've gone through CAPE
I believe they,
twice.
right before their last submission, they were approved again.
Okay, okay.
I have questions about the funding source for the job shadowing experiences that are referenced in here and the field supervisors who are Kentucky certified educators. Where's the funding for the covering for the subs that are going to be providing that? And then also for the administrators, who's tasked with administratively providing these observations, et cetera, that are referenced.
So that would be I mean, it's just going to be like any other program in the state. It would be the districts would be responsible.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think as I read this, one of the things that stuck out to me is in the other two existing Option 7 programs, there's a very strong partnership with an educator preparation program. That is fundamentally missing from this. I know several institutions have had the opportunity to meet with iTeach to determine whether that is an opportunity that they wish to pursue. And to my knowledge at this point, no one has pursued that. And I think one of the things that Kentucky has that these other states don't have is a very strong Option 6 program at our EPPs. And that's actually the feedback that I gave to the iTeach representative when they spoke with me about whether this was a partnership opportunity, because we have a very robust and active Option 6 program that clearly we would like to work together on induction and some of those other parts that are challenging to the Option 6 program. I am also hesitant in a number of ways as a function of no EPP being present. And I don't know whether that's on the guidelines and standards that were set forth for the program.
It's just recommended, I think.
I think it's a recommendation that's well made, but I also would caution on a lot of aspects of this.
You can make a motion at any time, unless there's a question. Did you have?
I was going to ask a question, but if you want to make a motion first, we can have a discussion after.
I make a motion to deny action item F.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Weedman. Is there a second?
Jackie Mayfield, second.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. We have a second. The motion before the board is to deny Option 7 Institute proposal for iTeach. Is there any discussion? Mr. Fryer.
Cassie, do you want to speak first?
So the board does have that authority. I just would caution you that if they have been found to meet your regulatory and guideline requirements, we will defend your decision. It is difficult to defend when there is this finding that they have met the guidelines now twice. However, we will move forward with that. I just would caution if you do have the review that they have gone through. And yes, while we do see more action in the Option 6 route, Option 7 is a statutory route. It is something that the legislature has created. It is something that this board is tasked with utilizing as well.
Can I ask a question about my own motion? Would we be able to defer this to the next board meeting in order to have our questions answered?
Yes, so there's, let me think through my Robert's Rules of Order here. There are a few ways that we could go about this. You could amend your motion if you want to amend your motion to defer consideration for discussion with iTeach, and then the board would vote on the amended motion vote to approve the amendment. So you would make the,
I would like to offer myself a friendly amendment.
But before you do, Sarah, can we keep discussing this
I
just
agree.
one moment, only because I just want to respond to the statutory regulatory expectations and requirements. I think one of the other parts of this board that is more qualitative in nature and not quantitative in nature is the quality component. And we are stewards of the quality. We were actually acknowledged this morning by the legislature around our flexibility as well as our quality and ensuring quality within educator preparation and licensure. And so I would offer that, yes, we do have a number of checklists that we use to make sure that programs have some guidelines on what they are to submit, but I think it's fair for us to offer questions around quality and rigor within educator preparation programs. So just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, Sharon, the question I was going to ask before, and I'm sorry if it's somewhere obvious and I've overlooked it. I'm trying to look through that separate attachment of that 192-page document from them. The word encouraged caught me when you were giving your synopsis there in the agenda book, that they're encouraged to like seek out classroom observations. Do you know what I mean? Like I saw the note in one of the feedback things about like how is that how is that recorded monitor encouraged? Maybe I'm not seeing that answer to resolve somewhere, but like I know it mentioned that they have access to like videos of just like situational classrooms, but I think most of us would agree that's kind of different than actually like trying to go see a classroom directly versus just here's this pre-recorded thing, let's reflect on it. I don't know, the word encouraged just caught me off guard. Like encouraged to me means like, okay, I'll do it if I want to, but I really don't need to. So
I think what they're talking about is once a candidate is admitted,
starting it right away.
They are
Encouraged
then
to start right
encouraged
away.
from the very beginning.
Okay, but even if they don't, they still are as part of the requirements? That was the part I couldn't find for sure.
Yes.
Okay,
From
I'm
my
sorry if I
understanding,
overlooked it.
yes.
It's not optional, right? I mean, encouragement to me means you can or you can't.
I think what Sharon was saying was the time frame. In
They're
which you
encouraged to start right away.
Not the hours.
As soon as they're admitted, they're
Okay.
encouraged to start right then.
Okay.
But I was still
Yes,
trying to find
they
the
are.
part where it said they were, because
You
like I
need
saw
a better word than
I saw one of the
encouraged.
feedback things was like there's a mention of classroom observations in local schools. How's this recorded, monitored, encouraged? But then I didn't necessarily see like
Do it.
I saw like a thing. I don't know. I guess I'm with Vice Chair Weedman. I feel like there's still like a lot of questions and it's not, yeah, like, so if you want to make your friendly amendment.
Okay.
Well, I'll just make sure, are we good with discussion on this before we move forward? All right, go ahead, make your amendment.
Okay, I would like to revise my previous amendment or previous motion just from denying to now deferring acceptance of option item 7 to revisit it at the next EPSB board meeting.
Okay, and then we will have to take a vote on the
And-
amendment.
And
you need a second on the amendment.
well, okay, on the amendment, can we make sure it says that like in effort to gain more information and board clarity? So that way we can ask questions to be brought back at the meeting? Do I need to like explicitly say that? Sorry, everybody, going off script.
So make sure I have, your amended motion is that you amend your motion to defer consideration of iTeach's proposal to the February board meeting to obtain additional information and invite iTeach to attend.
Yes, even if that is virtual. So yes.
Okay, that's the amendment on the floor. Do I have a second for that amendment?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. All those in favor of the amendment to defer for the February meeting where
Can we just further discussion on that amendment? I just want to make sure, like, to be clear, like, I know we just put the verb, I'm not, sorry.
I know you're good.
I don't want it to be next board meeting then. So to be clear, the expectation is that they have to show up even virtually, or do we want like a communication happen between now and then? Here's our answer to the pressing questions we had. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to be clear in our, like, if we're kicking the can to the next meeting, I want to make sure there's a clear plan in place Like, is the board's as we vote on this, is it that we want a representative available during the meeting, or we want questions submitted like between now and then that get answered and
So my understanding of the amended motion that was just made, and thank you, Megan, for recording this meeting so we can have that later, is that you are deferring consideration to the February meeting to obtain additional information and invite iTeach to attend. So they would be invited to be here. That additional information can be obtained by staff. We can share this recording to have additional information that is included in your agenda book. There can't be discussions that happen outside of the meeting because we have to comply with open meetings, but that can be added to the agenda book.
And I would just say an encouragement, and we'll use that word, encouragement that we submit those questions ahead of time as.
I think those questions were from this discussion.
Okay. Are there
any questions before we make this vote?
Okay.
And if there's any other questions that board members have, they can refer them maybe to you guys prior to the meeting as well to obtain information, I would assume.
So we do want to be careful about taking action outside of a board meeting and having discussions, because if we're having discussions with a quorum outside of an open meeting, then we are violating Open Meetings Acts. So if we have additional questions that we want to discuss today, we can do that. But my thank you for the recording that we will send and share for them to address those concerns, I believe, especially around the partnership piece of it. CJ, what you have mentioned with that and the expectations and timeline piece, as well as their accreditation, and then the partnerships not only being within this state, but with other states as well.
And that we reserve the right to ask new questions when they're here.
Yes, the list of questions now does not anyway inhibit your ability to ask new questions in February.
On that information. Great.
Call to vote.
All right. So
I didn't mean,
we had a second on that.
Yes.
The motion before the board to defer, essentially to defer to February meeting, and that will be listed out appropriately in how that amendment or that motion is made. Is there any discussion?
That was the discussion, I think.
Hearing none, all those in favor for accepting that amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right. Now, the motion before the board is to defer action item F to February's meeting. We've gone through the second. All right, so I just want to make sure, going through my mind there. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All right, and the motion passes. Thank you all. And it is 1:55, if that helps on the recording to go back. All right, moving on to waivers now. The board is now ready to review waiver requests. KRS 161028-1N provides that the board has the authority to waive its administrative regulations when a request is submitted by an applicant for certification, a post-secondary institution, or a superintendent of a local school district. When requesting a waiver, the requesting party must submit to the board a written request along with appropriate justification for the waiver. The EPSB staff reviewed the waivers with EPSB Waiver Committee during an open meeting on Thursday afternoon, and the waiver committee formulated recommendations. Sharon's back with us again and will present the waiver request to the full board, and the waiver committee chair, Kathy Gunn, will present the committee's recommendation for final action, starting with waiver A.
So just kind of give you clarity. A, B, C, D are very similar. So they're all about waiving the GPA for an emergency certificate. Okay. The last one's a little different. This one is from Bourbon County, and they have been unsuccessful in finding qualified teachers for a health and physical education position. The candidate has been filling this position as a long-term substitute. The district says they have done an excellent job and has built many positive relationships. The district has posted the position but had no other applicants. So the district is requesting that the EPSB waive the required GPA and issue an emergency certificate for this candidate.
Thank you. And Ms. Gunn, what was the waivers committee's recommendation?
We're on page 138 in case anybody wanted to catch up. And the waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by Bourbon County. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that the EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. And is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the waiver.
Thank you, Mr. Fryer. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 2120, request to waive emergency certificate requirements for Bourbon County schools. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next, we have waiver B.
This one is from Grant County. They've been unsuccessful in finding qualified teachers for a media specialist position. This applicant has also filled the position as a long-term substitute and is interested in becoming a certified teacher. They plan on enrolling in a Master's of Arts in Teaching program this winter semester. The applicant's GPA is a result of medical issues. The district is requesting that the EPSB waive the required GPA and issue an emergency certificate for this candidate.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request and supporting documentation submitted by Grant County Schools. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that the EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. At this time, I'll need a motion.
I make a motion to approve waiver B.
Thank you, Captain Rosinski. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Weedman. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 2120, request to waive emergency certificate requirements for Grant County schools. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Now waiver C.
This one is Letcher County Schools. They've been unsuccessful in finding qualified teachers for a middle school English position. The candidate does have an English bachelor's degree and is currently substitute teaching. The candidate is in the student teaching portion of the degree, so taking additional courses to raise the GPA is not an option at this time. There were no applicants for this position, so the district is requesting that the EPSB waive the required GPA and issue an emergency certificate.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn.
The committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by Letcher County Schools. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that the EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. At this time, I'll need a motion.
Motion?
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 2120, request to waive emergency certificate requirements for Letcher County schools. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next is waiver D.
This one is Newport Independent Schools. The candidate is currently in the classroom teaching 6th grade English language arts, but needs the emergency certificate to continue in that position. The district states that the candidate was supposed to be in a Master's of Arts in Teaching program, but had not completed the process in time to start classes. The district is requesting that the EPSB waive the required GPA and issue an emergency certificate.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by Newport Independent Schools. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that the EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. At this time, I'll need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the waiver.
Thank you, Captain Rosinski. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 2120, request to waive emergency certificate requirements for Newport Independent Schools. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion passes. Next is waiver E.
So this one is to waive the equivalent certification requirements for out-of-state prepared educator Sequoia Johnson. She has been serving as a long-term substitute in Kentucky for the past 7 years. She has taken and passed all the Kentucky assessments required for elementary certification. As she was not interested in teaching Indiana, she did not take the Indiana assessments, nor did she obtain certification in Indiana. She is requesting that the EPSB waive the requirement of possessing the equivalent certification in Indiana and issue her the certification to teach elementary in Kentucky.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request and supporting documentation submitted by the applicant. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that the EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. At this time, I'll need a motion.
Mayfield, motion.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. Is
Second.
there a second? Thank you, Captain Rosinski. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 4030, request to waive equivalent certification requirement for out-of-state prepared educator Sequoia Johnson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion passes. We have 2 alternative route to certification applications. These applicants are pursuing the option 1 exceptional work experience route to certification. This is one of the alternative routes established by the legislature in KRS 161048. An applicant with exceptional work experience must have an offer of employment from a local school district, a bachelor's or graduate degree meeting the minimum GPA requirements, and an academic major or a passing score on the academic content assessment in the area in which certification is being sought. The board will need to determine if the applicant's work experience constitutes exceptional work experience. The applications are presented by Todd Davis.
I feel like I need to have Ms. Halsman present all these. Application A is Barron County Public Schools has submitted an application and portfolio for Ms. Kelly Burge. The district is requesting the board approve the application for the certification area of middle grades English 5 through 9. The application and portfolio are included in your board materials. Ms. Burge has a Bachelor's of Arts in Journalism and over 10 years of experience in the field of journalism. She was a contributing writer for several publications and featured news articles as she worked as a news reporter, anchor, producer, and manager at various television stations. As an assignment manager, Ms. Burge oversaw daily planning of the news, content for shows, assigning reporter stories, creating shift schedules, mentoring reporters as well as producers. She received several reporting awards, several from the Kentucky Broadcast Association, as well as the CMA Close-Up Award of Merit for Journalism from the Country Music Association. The applicant meets the GPA requirements in the academic area. Therefore, Barron County Public Schools is requesting that you approve the middle grades, English grades 5 through 9, in that certification area today.
All right. At this time, I will need a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve Kelly Burge for English grades 5 through 9. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next, we have application B.
Application B is from Jefferson County Public Schools. They've submitted an application and portfolio for Mr. Jamel West. The district's requesting the board approve the application and certification in the areas of health and physical education, all grades. All the appropriate materials are included in your board materials as well. Mr. West has a Master's of Science degree in athletic training, as well as a Bachelor's of Science in Health and Human Performance and Exercise Science. He has over 10 years of experience in the field of health and physical education. He served as a recreational specialist in Louisville, Kentucky, at a recreational center that was established for at-risk youth. At this center, he has planned educational lessons promoting health and physical education, as well as collaborating and working with other team members, attended professional learning to stay abreast of current wellness practices. As a clinician, as an athletic trainer, Mr. West also created and carried out rehabilitation programs for orthopedic patients. Additionally, he has worked under a head athletic trainer in supporting sporting teams. The applicant meets the GPA requirements in the academic areas. Jefferson County Public Schools has offered the applicant a teaching position in health and physical education, and therefore is asking that you approve this application today.
Thank you. And at this time, I'll need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the application.
Thank you, Captain Rosinski. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. The motion before the board is to approve Jamel West for health and physical education for all grades. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay, and the motion passes. Thank you. I will now open the floor to any board member for board comments. Does anyone have anything they wish to share?
I just want to say thank you to Cassie and Melissa and to Byron. They did a wonderful job today explaining the thorough process of program review and accreditation. And I think as Elizabeth and I were sitting, listening and watching all of program review all at one time on 3 slides. Melissa made a comment of, I know it seems simple in such a short period of time, and our stomachs are like dropping through the floor because it's quite a process. And to be able to explain it efficiently and effectively to our legislators, it was really an important moment. They represented the board really well, and I just want to thank them for taking the time. There's a lot of prep that goes into 2 hours worth of testimony in front of our legislature. And so I just want to thank everybody for that.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. And I will say, just for the members, I know we didn't get to talk about it a whole lot today, other than when we asked you to rearrange your schedules to accommodate the interim joint committee meeting. But we were asked by the legislature to present on the traditional route to certification, the alternative routes to certification, and then the process for accreditation and program approval. Dr. Murphy and Dr. Elizabeth Dinkins were also asked to present regarding what is happening at the EPP level around literacy and numeracy. And they did a fantastic job representing EPPs, Dr. Murphy representing this board as well. Just very well received by the legislature, which doesn't always happen. So it was a great morning. I felt like we had a lot of legislators that were complimentary of the work of this board. We had educators who were on that committee that were very complimentary of the work of this board. A lot of shout outs for KTIP, so we like to hear that. No new proposals for new options that were thrown around, so that's also a plus that we will put out there. But I do want to thank all of our staff that helped prepare for this. Dr. Diebel really presenting around the accreditation program approval process. Dr. Darnell is with us this morning. Todd Davis really worked with Tessa Harris, who is new in our office and who was sick last week, but still worked very hard to get us all of the numbers in a format that the legislature could use. So it was a team effort and a good morning.
And I will say, because he asked that I actually say it and report his name, so Representative Timoney actually wanted to just reiterate, he was one of the ones that gave a shout out during the presentation, but he wanted to just say how well he thought of EPSB, how accommodating staff is when going through the process of actually getting a certification from an individual level, to call the offices, to talk to someone, that someone's not just saying yes, but sort of walking them through that process. And so he just wanted to brag on on all of the staff that he wanted to make sure that he let you all know that that was something he was grateful for as an educator himself, but also as a representative. And I'm hopeful that that will go a long way in pushing for KTIP funding. So just wanted to make sure. I think we went the whole session. I never mentioned KTIP. So KTIP funding, one of our priorities. So hopefully that'll get passed this session. Any other board comments? All right. Well, at this time, I believe we're ready to go into closed session pursuant to KRS 61810C1C and J to conduct a character and fitness review and to review potential actions relating to complaints and reports. At this time, I'll need a motion to go into closed session.
Make a motion.
Thank you, Ms. Nell. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Weedman. The motion before the board is to go into closed session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. We are now ready to move into closed session, and we'll take a 10-minute break.
Okay.
All right, at this time, I will need a motion to go into open session.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield, and the second by Captain Rosinski. Motion before the board is to go back into open session. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And we are back in open session. At this time, we will we will determine what the discussion was during closed session, and then we will vote on it. So, character and fitness. 1, approve. 2, defer. 3 through 6, approve. 7, deny. 8 through 10, approve. 11 and 12, approve with conditions. For CA4 online character and fitness, 1 through 3 approve, 4 deny, 5 through 8 approve, 9 deny, 10 approve, 11 deny, 12 and 13 approve, 14 deny, 15 through 18 approve, 19 deny, 20 approve. For agreed orders, 1 through 38 accept, 39 deny or reject, and 40 accept. For findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommended orders and appeal rights, for number 1, we modify the findings of fact and conclusions of law in accordance with the respondent's exceptions, except the recommended orders. For 2, we accept findings of facts, conclusions of law, and accept the recommended orders. For motions to reconsider, we defer. For educator cases, 1 through 3, defer for training, classroom management training. For number 4, attorney review. 5, dismiss with prejudice. For 6 through 10, attorney review. 11, admonish. 12 through 20, attorney review. 20 and 21 and 22, dismiss with prejudice. 23, admonish. 24, dismiss with prejudice. 25, 26, and 27, attorney review. 28 and 29, admonish. 30 and 31, dismiss with prejudice. 32, defer for training, admin code training. 33, dismiss with prejudice. 34 through 40, refer to hearing. 41, no further action. 42 through 45, refer to hearing. 46 through 49, dismiss with prejudice. 50 and 51, dismiss without prejudice. 52 through 55, admonish. And 56 through 59, dismiss with prejudice. At this time, we will vote on those items discussed during the closed session, starting with Captain Rosinski.
Lisa Rudzinski, yes to all.
CJ Fryer, yes to all. Recuse on agreed order 5 and agreed order 32.
Priscilla Keller, yes to all.
Jackie Mayfield, yes for all.
Corinne Murphy, yes for all.
Amy Lingo, yes to all. Recuse on agreed order 26.
Diane Barry, yes to all.
Kathy Gunn, yes to all.
Amber Snell, yes to all.
And Justin Mitchell, yes to all. All right. Thank you all for that. The motion passes there. And at this time, I will need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I saw Dr. Murphy first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Snell, the motion before the board is to adjourn. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And we are now adjourned.